Welcome, welcome. How are you guys doing tonight? Good. My name's Teresa, and I'm the Events and Workshops producer at General Assembly. By show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with General Assembly? Maybe you've been to a class, workshop, event? Wow, a lot of you. And how many of you guys have never heard of General Assembly before? Okay, a couple of you. Welcome. We're very excited to have you here this evening. For those of you who've not heard of General Assembly, GA is a tech education company specializing in the most in-demand skills across data, design, business, and technology. We have 20 campuses around the globe where we empower people to pursue the work that they love. So whether you're looking to add skills to your tool belt or if you're looking to pivot and transition into a new career, GA wants to be there to help you accomplish your goals. So if you really like what you enjoy and you learn here this evening, we'd like you to check out ga.co/Chicago to check out our full offering of part-time, full-time, in-person, online classes, workshops, and events. And without further ado, the real reason you guys are here this evening to learn about the intersection of design and technology, I'd like to turn things over to Bridget from Trunkclub.
Hi everyone, I'm Bridget Hughes and I'm the tech recruiter here at Trunkclub. I've been here for a little over 2.5 years and I've helped hire some of the amazing talent that we have, which you guys will see on the panel tonight. And we also have a lot of opportunities available on our team: data science, data engineers, our data services team, engineering. So if you guys are interested in hearing more about opportunities, feel free to come up to me at some point or Megan in the back on our recruiting team, and we'd be happy to share more about it. But without further ado, thanks for coming to the panel, and here they are.
Thank you, Bridget. All right, y'all. So first and foremost, thank you. It's a Thursday night. You guys could have been doing a million other things. Instead, you decided to come listen to a couple of nerds and a couple of four nerds, really, talk about their passions, their lives, and what they do every day at Trunkclub. So for us at Trunkclub, we totally thank you for that. So it's not about me tonight. It's about our four panelists. So without further ado, so I have to preface this. This is some of their first time public speaking, so I really need a hootin' and a hollering every time we invite someone up, all right? So first, we have Jenny Chamberlain, our software engineer on the customer side. Next, we have Kelly Burke, senior product designer. Up next, we have Danny, a product designer on our team. And last but not least, we have Brian Lee, engineering manager for Trunkclub. And my name is Mig Reyes. I lead the design team here at Trunkclub, and I'm happy to be interviewing them as well. So, while we do have a panel of 4 to my left, we also have a panel of about 75 to 80 right in front of us. So this might be a little bit of participation, both from our folks over here and you guys. And so we want to kick off the event and sort of understanding our audience, our crowd tonight. Show of hands, who's interested in getting into technology, tech, design, engineering, and haven't yet? Awesome. How about people who are about like in the middle of their career as a designer or an engineer and looking to maybe learn about the other craft? There's another third. And lastly, who sort of feels like they're kind of senior in their career and maybe they're looking to get into leadership or management? And then another small few. Excellent. So the reason we ask is that we have something for everyone this evening. What we want to do is talk about what it's like to start in both engineering and design, and also for those of us that aren't new to this, how do you level up your career and break into management, break into leadership? But let's begin the questions this evening. So what's interesting about you four is that for the most part, none of you had traditional backgrounds. One of you has started a company not once but twice and is on our design team. Another of you is on the planning team, former photographers. So I want to just ask each four of you, how did you realize you wanted to pursue what you pursue today? And sort of talk to us about what you do at Trunkclub and sort of share with us how you got into design or engineering. And I guess Kelly will start.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I started my career on the account side of advertising. And while I was there, I had the fortunate opportunity that we were starting a UX team within our agency. And at the time, we only had a director, and we didn't have any other more junior UXers. And so they needed someone to help them recruit for usability studies and put together decks recapping all of the findings. And so my boss actually tapped me and was like, this seems like something you would be interested in. Do you want to help them 50% of the time? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then I just fell in love with it way more than I ever loved account planning. And so I started trying to make my way 100% UX. And while doing that, I decided to enroll in an HCI program too. And so through doing both of those, I found my way into a 100% like product design UX role. And that's really how I broke in.
Kelly, let's dig into that a little bit. You said that you've sort of got interest and they asked you to participate 50%. How did you even know how to start? How did you know what wireframes were? How did you know half this process if you were on the account side?
Yeah, so initially I started out with research because that's what I was most comfortable in, recruiting people to come in for focus groups and stuff like that to do advertising ad boards. And then based on that, I guess my associate designer next to me just kind of like saw some promise. And so he started offering the ability for me to help wireframe. From that, I actually started doing more visual design. As a kid, I would like toy around in Photoshop. I had a really dorky website where I promoted Beanie Babies. So I had like some of the foundation there, and I guess it was just like given the opportunity to actually do it for like paid client work that I was really grateful for.
Awesome. Danny, Jenny?
So we're talking about how we got started,
Yep.
right? So I was a former military journalist and photojournalist, and my husband was also active duty Navy. It's a little bit a story about the two of us because we both got into tech together. But one day we decided that we didn't want to be in the military anymore, and so I said to him, and he was active duty, so it means he was full-time military. And I said, why don't you pick a career, and we'll do whatever we need to do to make it happen. And so I was working in office at the time, and he sent me this video for a coding boot camp. And he said, I would like to attend this school. And I watched it, and it was a really motivational video about how learning to code can change the world. And I said, I want to do that too. So so we ended up going to a coding boot camp here in Chicago together. And it was a really great experience. We had a really good time. But I remember there's always kind of these threads of things that I was interested in when I was younger. To include, I was a photographer, and I started my own portraiture business. And I built myself a website using a WordPress theme. And one day I wanted to customize the theme a little bit. And when I say customize the theme, I wanted to move a line down like maybe 20 pixels. And I spent, I promise you, 4 hours trying to figure out how to move this line 20 pixels. And that was not fun, but I think it kind of gave me an interest in how I could do that a little bit more efficiently than the 4 hours that I spent doing it. And so I went to the coding boot camp almost not knowing if I would like it, and it turns out that I love it. And I've been working at Trunkclub for 2.5 years since then. So.
Awesome. I like what you said there about wanting to change the world. I think that's sort of what we feel, at least on the technology side, is that we're changing retail. We're redesigning, reinventing retail as an entire technology organization, so that's really cool. Danny, how about you? We hired you out of school, actually, and you didn't study design either, so how'd you get into this?
Yeah, I studied business. I got an undergrad and business degree in college at the University of Michigan, and I sort of just honestly faked my way until I made it. I still am doing that. So I just started taking on projects just a little bit outside of my comfort zone. First, it was just with friends. Then it was for some consulting and some small projects, and just taking them a little bit outside of my comfort zone, so I would have to go and learn how to do something new, whether it was learning HTML and CSS or learning how to design mobile wireframes. And it was just really out of a drive to just want to make stuff. I started taking a class in my freshman year of college, just an intro to computer science class that really opened my eyes to coding and engineering and just technology in general. That really inspired me to just start like learning on my own. And the way I do that best is just by taking on these projects for fun, for friends, for money, working on cool ideas. That's a way to learn.
Awesome. Brian, what about you? How'd you get your start here?
Oh, I'm the boring one. I did computer science, and then
All right, moving on.
But yeah, I think a lot of you can probably resonate with like it's about building stuff, right? Whether you're a designer or engineer, you kind of there's two ways you start. Like you either start building stuff, or if you're like me, you start breaking stuff when you're little and get into trouble. But that's where you kind of tinker with stuff, right? So I thought about becoming a doctor, but I don't think I can break people, so I decided not to go that way. So, but yeah, so I started building stuff, breaking stuff, and then I got into computer programming like in middle school and high school, playing Oregon Trail and then like building stuff, taking computer science classes, and that's how I got into engineering in general. Went to CS. I did a CS as an undergrad. But as for like designing and engineering, that's what the topics here is about. I think there's a lot of similarities, and that's how I got into also design too. When I in my previous job, I had a lot of good interaction with a fellow designer, and then really we're just all trying to solve problems, right? Like designers solve it one way, and engineers solve it one way, but we're all trying to just solve real world problems. And then that's how I got into design. So I do sketch and wireframes and whatnot, and like UX research a lot. And I try to apply it into like team process. I think that's how I got into management. You know, try to understand like what the problem is, understand how people work, and just really listen, just like any UX researcher does, like Kelly does right here. So that's how I kind of went into like management, engineering, design a little bit all over the place.
Awesome, thanks guys. Well, we are so lucky to have you at Trunkclub. Let's dig in. Before we really get into the intersection of design and technology, let's level set with the crowd a little bit. Let's actually define a little bit about what design means at Trunkclub or tech companies. Let's really define what engineering means at a company, because for the history of people thinking that they want to get into tech or design, design means going to art school, learning about art, and then engineering means getting a traditional CS degree. Even though, Brian, you have one, you know, and you hire people that don't have CS degrees. So can you share a little bit of day-to-day and what engineering or design looks like for real, day-to-day, 9 to 5 at Trunkclub for you guys?
I think the core of it is, like Brian said, just problem solving, and like he said, in different ways. But like day to day, it's everything from talking to customers, stylists, and just listening, learning, diagnosing problems, and just thinking critically about different ways we might be able to solve these problems, and working with each other to figure out the right solutions through design, engineering, data science, other things like that.
So I'm going to press on you a little bit here, Danny. So I think everyone would agree that problem solving is most people's jobs, right? Whether it's outside of design and engineering. What does some of your output look like day to day?
So my output ranges. Sometimes I'm working in Sketch and doing high fidelity mock-ups. Sometimes I'm sketching with pen and paper and just writing things out on my scratch pad. Sometimes I'm coding and prototyping. My output really like depends on what the problem is and like the time frame and how high fidelity we need to go. So it really ranges based on the problem, the team, the timeline, all that stuff.
Cool. Brian, what does managing engineering look like at Trunkclub every day?
At the end of the day, your battery's at like 2%. I think it's not any different really. I look at, as I said, like whether it's design or engineering and management, you're trying to identify problems and like find a solution to it, like through process, right? You have a design process, engineering process, but same thing with like team processes. So I think the hardest part with any of these is really like, given a problem, anybody can kind of find a solution to it, but like really identifying, like asking yourself, like, is this the right problem? Like, is this the root of the problem? And really just digging deeper and understanding like what the problem is. And only then you can actually start coming up with like solutions. And then really just, I think one of the main thing different about management is really it's not just about you trying to find a solution to the problem. It's really like helping understand the problem and then like, get answers and solution from people smarter than you, right? Like ask Danny, ask Kelly, ask Jenny, like, like what do you think about this? And gathering this different perspective and being supportive about it. And then also finding a way to kind of like reproduce it, right? Through process, like reflect upon what worked well, what didn't work well, and then like what in the process can we change to make improvements in that.
Cool. Kelly, what's your take on what you do as a designer at Trunkclub every day?
Similar to Danny, it definitely varies a lot. It could be from like a flow diagram trying to improve a process. It could be weighing in on stuff we've heard from customers. We have intercom here, and so we currently like get a feed of input from stylists coming in like all the time when something doesn't look right or they have feedback or they think something's broken. So it's distilling those into something actionable. And I think it's really like back to the problem solving thing. It's coming up with a lot of different ways to solve the same problem so that you can figure out which one of those ways might be maybe the quickest, what way might be a little bit more complicated, but something that is like has more longevity for the business. So I think it really depends, but it's definitely, even as a designer, it's not all about like being in Sketch or creating something super high fidelity.
Cool, I like that. A lot of research and a lot of the work happens outside the computer too. Cool.
I was just about to make that same point. Actually, so I'm a fairly new engineer, about 2.5 years, and I would say that I initially was a little bit surprised at how much work happens outside of your computer, like you say. At Trunkclub, I think it's really what makes working at Trunkclub really fun is that there's a lot of collaboration, not only between engineers, but also between engineers and designers, and engineers and product managers and designers, between different expertise. Different experts on the team. So this means for me that my days look like some parts of them are coding, some parts of them are in meetings about what we can do to make our architecture better. Some parts of it are participating in user testing. Some parts of it are also planning out our future work and what we can do to make that more efficient. So any number of those things is a part of being a engineer. It's not just sitting at your computer in isolation. It's really about being a part of a team and working with them to solve the problems that you collectively have.
I like that you brought up collaboration. We'll circle back to that, but to sort of still continue on the conversation of getting started in design, getting started in engineering, can you rewind all of yourselves back to the point where you did start learning design, you did start learning engineering? What are the things what's like a foundation or a principle or something to the core of design or engineering that people really should focus on versus what people think? And so a lot of times in the industry you'll hear, oh, I'm a designer, I need to code, I need to know HTML. Oh, on engineering, I need to know all of these languages. Is that true? What is it do you really need to think about if you're beginning a career in design or engineering?
So at least for design, I would say, first of all, like, figure out what experiences that you really enjoy. Like, what are the products that you find yourself gravitating towards, and like dig into why. What problem do they solve for you? Again, do I like the visuals? Do I like how the interactions work in this product? That's kind of like where I started, and I found things that I really loved. And when I was trying to hone my design craft, I would actually take those and I would try to recreate them myself. I thought that was a really nice way to actually like dig in, and while taking someone else's work as like a learning, it allowed me to learn a whole bunch that I wouldn't have otherwise like pushed myself to do. As a new designer, I wouldn't have really known where to start. So starting with something that I admired, I thought was a nice first step.
Nice.
For me, I think it sort of clicked when I built my first website and then started like looking at other websites and apps and realized that behind all these apps and big companies and websites, it's still people making decisions and building these things that we use. And so I started to sort of look through things through a different lens where, every little thing that we interact with, someone is thinking about and someone's making that decision and someone's building that thing and designing it. And just started, thinking about things in that light helped me just continue thinking about how to do these things on my own, emulating other people that I liked, other things like that.
Sounds like both of you on design found inspirations, companies that you admired, products you admired, and tried to follow those paths.
Yeah,
cool.
Still do.
Awesome. Brian?
I think being curious is the most important part, and all of you are here because you're curious, right? And that's why as designer engineers, we break stuff. We break stuff because we're curious on how it works. So, for example, a couple days ago, I think I was in the elevator with a couple of my friends here, and then we were talking about calculators, and then what does the CE on the calculator mean, right? Out of nowhere, we're just curious, random, and then we just looked it up. So things like that, right? But it's funny, but if you really think about it, it's something we see every day, and then we just assume it works, we know what it works, but just stop to think about and ask the question, actually, why is it called CE? What does it stand for? And I think that goes for any designer and engineers, right? At the root of it, you're curious, you ask why. Why does it work? Why does it not work? What will happen if this happened, right? And then I think that's what really sets apart from a really good designer engineer from who's I think you touched upon what do you think people do and what it actually does kind of thing. It's not about just coding and building something or creating beautiful mock-ups. It's the thought behind it, right? If you have a sign-up form, why is it like that? And even when you don't like something, say like a new company made like a sign up page that you hate, well, instead of just bashing on it, instead of bashing on Twitter's new hamburger menu, like really think about why did they do that and what kind of thought process did they go through. I think this is the kind of nature of like designer and engineer, just being curious. That's where it's like where it starts, I think.
I will have to call out, Brian's one of the most even-keeled people at Trunkclub, and so when there's conflict, we always rely on Brian to help us mediate. He really is really good about thinking about problems that way. Jenny, what about you? What's your perspective on that?
There's really, for people that are learning to code, there's really no substitute for just actually coding and building things. I can tell you that I remember my initial steps to learning to code, and I was taking a lot of like online classes and reading and stuff, and those are all good, and those are all very valuable, but I can tell you exactly that I know how to spell the word separate, because after you spend an hour and a half figuring out that you spelled it wrong in one place and that variables don't work unless they're the same in both places, that's a lesson that you keep with you for life. So there's really no substitute for doing that. And over again, like just little things, big things, whatever it is, you just have to keep coding. What you code or how you code, that's really a personal choice or something that's up to you. Whatever you're interested in is kind of like the vein that I always push people to. For people that are coming out of some sort of boot camp or some sort of experience like that, I always recommend that you like pick a subject that you're interested in and just kind of dive in as deep as you can, because as everybody who's involved in tech knows, there's just so many things to learn and so many things are so exciting and new and shiny. But I think there's a lot of value in diving deep into something and giving yourself a little bit of focus. So I think personally for me that was really hard, but I think there's a lot of value in that as well. So that's my advice, is to kind of pick a thing that you're interested in and learn as much about it as you can.
Cool. Now, Jenny, you actually did touch on collaboration earlier. So let's pull the veil back on Trunkclub's engineering and design processes. Let's share how the sausage is made. Anyone that's not Brian, because we have a separate question for Brian to follow up with this, is what is the ideal state of a feature being built from beginning to end at Trunkclub? What is the smoothest, best design and engineering process from beginning to end? How is a project kicked off? What happens in the middle? What happens in the end?
I'll let design answer first.
Great. So I would say it definitely starts with a clear need. Either someone from the business has surfaced or something that we've found through doing our own research. From there,
Kelly, actually, can we color this a little bit by sharing a specific feature we might have built too?
Sure. So let's go with message templates for, we have a tool that our stylists use. We pretty much home grow all of our internal software. And so we noticed just through doing contextual inquiry or shadowing with stylists that they had created these elaborate Google documents where they were typing out responses to like common questions that they had to answer about our service. And it was taking them a ton of time to switch tabs, go back and forth, highlight things, paste it back into a message thread with a customer, and like tweak the language a little bit so that it was personalized.
What's an example question stylists repeat over and over again?
So how does Trunkclub work? Or what is the $25 styling fee? Those I would say are like two that are most commonly asked. And so in seeing this behavior repeated across multiple stylists, we figured out like maybe there's a way that we can make this better and actually bring it into the software so they don't have to continually like change tabs and be taken away from the core of the experience, which is Messenger. So upon discovering the problem, like fleshing out a coherent project brief so everyone kind of knows what we will be doing, what problem we will not be solving, because initially like you kind of have to start small or try to scope back a little bit. So I think having that clear cut is really essential to a go at a first project. And then from there, I definitely appreciate having some time to concept initial solutions, and then of course like all of the validation that goes into it. So testing it with stylists, doing a design review with engineers, product managers, other stakeholders from the business, and then iterating on the usability testing of those features, and then shipping them out there, digging into metrics, figuring out if they actually work or not, if they're having an impact on the business. If they are great, if they're not, that's great to know too, and then we can figure out how to shape them more from there.
Cool. And let's actually use Danny as a bridge to Jenny here. So you sort of skipped to the end of ship it out there, but Danny, as Kelly talks about features being shipped out there, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of gray area in terms of it can change a lot, but it's iterating on the different solutions and bringing in different perspectives. design, engineering, other stakeholders involved. So for that specific example, it was stylists, it was people on the training team, it was people on our sales operations team who all have interesting perspective, and getting their opinions on it early as possible in the process, and then just continuing to iterate, put it in front of these stylists and getting their feedback on it, and just until it feels right, until we validated it. And then working with engineering to actually turn what's sort of in a prototype or a mock-up into reality is a really fun process. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, let's pass it to Jenny. And Jenny, you can sort of speak toward how engineering sort of takes us to the home stretch. So if Kelly started with research, project brief, and basic ideas, Danny then says, we bring in engineering, we start to build this thing. Mm-hmm. Now it's mostly in engineering's hands, so take us to the home stretch.
Sure. The thing about engineering is that it's a lot about context, right? When you have a solution that design that's built for you, or has made for you, you say, you look at it and you talk with them and you say, okay, here are some of the trade-offs that we have to make. We can do this and make it look exactly like you want, which is always an option, or we can do this slight tweak and make it, 50% faster, meaning like in a shorter amount of time. So it's actually, that's the part that I think is kind of neat at Trunkclub, is that there's a lot of collaboration. It's really easy, you have really easy access to your designers and say, hey, how important is this to you? How much of a priority is this? Would you rather I do this or this? Because you can work with them and say, so that you're still able to ship things, and maybe in a manner so that they can get some information faster, so they can iterate faster. Or if they're like, no, this is really important, this is the way it has to be, then we can be like, okay, well, here's what's going to take, and this is the context of our system and why it takes so long. So with that, with those decisions in place, you can build it. And then when you have a close collaboration with your design and your product managers as well, if there's something they're like, hey, we didn't, you guys, did we think about this? You have input there to say, I'm not sure that this will work inside our system. There's other contexts, or there's another part of our system that looks like this. Do you think it maybe would be better if it was more consistent? You can offer those thoughts, and design can be like yes or no, or whatever they give their expertise to. So that part of the process is, like I said, just a lot of back and forth, a lot of talking about how you want to insert it inside the system that you already have.
Cool. So I like how you guys sort of painted the picture that when it starts with the early process, it's open field, it's green field, we can do anything. And then when it gets to engineering, we have the relentless pragmatism of we should probably maybe not do that and go that crazy. And so it's cool that you guys highlighted all of that.
I do have a statement about that too, though. Actually, another fun part about being an engineer at Trunkclub is that you actually get into the design process really early. I've definitely sat in like kind of ideation sessions with designers, which I find to be super fun, so that you can kind of give that a little bit of that input or more of that context earlier on in the process, maybe to make things faster.
Cool. We'll dig into that in a little bit. But Brian, we're picking on you here because you actually are very, very passionate about process, doing things the right way, doing things a streamlined way, doing things easier. And throughout the design and engineering process, there is friction, and we've not always had it easy at Trunkclub. We're constantly changing the way we work. So, Brian, can you share with us what happens when there's conflict with design and engineering, or there's friction in somewhere in the development process? How have we best fixed those and made new process coming out of those?
I think friction, I don't know if friction is a word I think I will use, but like I understand. I think you don't want it to get into friction, right? I think it's just comes down to being, I'm gonna keep on using this, but it comes down to being curious, right? Like we work on something, let's say like Kelly and I worked on something and then it didn't go well, right? Well, why didn't it go well, right? And just having a mutual understanding of like, what was that person trying to do and what was I trying to do? And usually the thing that's missing is, like Jenny said, context, right? Like maybe I didn't have context of what the goal of the project was or what the design was trying to solve. And like and then like if I assume things, I think that's where like friction comes in, right? You assume things and then you don't have the full context. So I think it goes both ways. Like I think you need to be curious and really try to understand the context and like really be mindful of like what you're assuming. Like I think I like to say like, assume everything is wrong and everything is incorrect and like everything is incorrect and just like find out. I think that's one way to approach it. But also just like, when you're pulling someone into this happens a lot, right? Like when you're working on a feature, like we sometimes have to randomly pull in another engineer or another designer or like data science and then, hey, can you help us with this? But it's really important to like stop and pause and like, give the full context, like where are we, how did we get here, and where we like to go. And I think that's been helpful.
Cool. Maybe you all can sort of share with our crowd tonight a little bit about what makes Trunkclub technology and Trunkclub product team really exciting and unique from a lot of other companies. Brian, you say it all the time, curious. And I think that is a thread on with everyone in Trunkclub technology. Can you guys sort of talk about the learner-teacher culture that we have here and how it helps us make better software?
Yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, for me, the most exciting part is being able to learn from everyone else. Coming here straight out of school, I didn't have a ton of design or engineering experience, but if I look back 2 years ago, the amount I've learned in that time is pretty crazy. And it doesn't even feel like learning. It's just sort of like watching and observing and asking questions. And so being able to be a part of these different teams and processes and sort of picking up on engineering skills, picking up on things the data science team is doing, and just asking questions along the way is definitely exciting to me.
I'd say too, a lot of people at Trunkclub I've found to be very patient, and they're definitely willing to go the extra mile to help someone learn something new. So first of all, I strongly believe that there's something that you can learn from absolutely everyone. I think a lot of the engineers are very willing to pull like a product designer like me into a pairing room that we have and like teach me how to get into Terminal and like get into Catalog app and start doing updates to CSS, which I mean, the upfront cost is definitely a piece of their time, but I think later on that helps me become a more proficient designer too. And I'm definitely still learning in that regard, but eventually I hope to be able to just go in there and do a lot of that myself, much like Danny is amazing and goes in there and does like all of this on his own. And so I think I've been like really impressed with the willingness of others on the team to help level everyone else up.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I think when you know that one of your teammates knows something, and it actually doesn't have to be in engineering, it could be really in any like field at Trunkclub. If you know that one of your teammates knows something, you can pretty much put time on their calendar blind and be like, hi, can you sit with me for half an hour and tell me about this? And there's no questions asked. There's no like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. There's nothing like that. It's really very collaborative. It's really very great, actually. It's one of the most attractive things I think about working here, is that you're working not only with really smart people, but smart people that are willing to teach you about the things that they know. So.
Cool. And then if Jenny and Brian, can you sort of touch on some of the like periphery things we do outside of our computers? You had a really big initiative where you invited a lot of people to come share on stage. And then Brian, if you can even talk about just some of the culture behind our all hands and what we learn and get out of those too.
A couple months ago, we had kind of an internal conference, and it was just really an opportunity for our teammates to share about things, something about they were knowledgeable in. And so we had a couple of people speak about I mean, it really could be anything. I didn't actually limit the topics, but some people spoke about something in their jobs that they were working on, or some people spoke about something that they just had a little bit of extra knowledge in that they were interested in, they were studying. This kind of thing actually happens all the time. We will have sometimes people put on a calendar like a lunch and learn, where they're like, there's something that they're interested in or something that they know about, or something that we knew that we're using in our stack, and they'll teach whomever wants to come to these sessions about it. One of our teammates runs kind of what we call TCU, or Trunkclub University, and so it's like classes that we take together on Friday. Mig taught one actually about design. We've had somebody else teach one about engineering. They're open to anybody on our tech team to come in and listen and learn, and so those have been really helpful and fun.
Yeah, I think you guys are really identifying. We push each other. We don't wait for the managers to teach us something. We're pushing each other. But Brian, you are a manager, so how do you play a part in here? And talk to a little bit about the all hands and sort of just the celebratory culture we have in engineering and tech.
So every 2 weeks, the entire tech team has like all hands from at 11 to 12, and basically the general structure is like general announcements, stuff like that, but also like the demo of the feature that we worked on, and like any other interesting thing too. So Jenny talked about a little bit just about you can learn anything from any person, right? So we sometimes do these lightning talks, so that it's like, you know, any random thing you can talk about for 3 to 5 minutes, doesn't have to be big. So one of the things actually that Jenny talked about was pairing. She pairs a lot, and then I was kind of curious, like, why do you pair a lot and what do you do? And then like she had a lot of interesting things to say about that. So I think it goes back to like just understanding that like everybody's different, and then like you have something to learn from everybody else. So what as you said about like what I do as a manager, in that aspect, I ask for help. Like I know my team well, but I don't know about other teams as much as the other managers. So I asked the managers, I asked our DevOps manager, I asked our app support manager, hey, like anybody in your team, like anything they want to talk about that they can maybe share from what their day-to-day life is, or like what they learn from like what they do. I go to like marketing team and like, hey, like I want to know a little bit more how you send out email campaign, and do you want to maybe talk to the tech team about it? So kind of just poking people around and asking questions and kind of encouraging that. And it's really easy at Trunkclub because like I think this culture of curiosity and like just being able to learn, like that's contagious. Like it's like spreads. Like if one person's like really passionate about it and then it gets the other person hyped up and want to learn, I think that's very healthy.
Cool. So let's start to bridge into sort of the middle of our careers here. And there's a question out there in the industry: should designers code? Hot take, I hate that question. 2 parts. It's not inclusive to engineers or other people that aren't designers. And 2, it just assumes that you must code, or it's like very binary, yes or no. So to Kelly and Danny, and Brian and Jenny, you'll answer too. For Kelly and Danny, the question isn't should you code, but how much about code should designers be comfortably involved in? Because Kelly, you don't code, and Danny, you code all the time. So let's get your perspective on that, and then we'll switch it back to Jenny and Brian, where we'll remix it up a little bit.
So my perspective and answer is, even though I really like to do it, it's not required or necessary by any means. I think the important thing is just having empathy and perspective on what goes into it from an engineering perspective. For me, I like to get that empathy by coding and building things, but that's one of many ways to get it. There's tons of other ways too.
Kelly, you've had a very successful design career at Trunkclub without pushing anything to GitHub. How'd you do it?
Until recently.
Well, you killed my question.
I know. So I would agree with Danny that you absolutely don't need to. I think it does definitely help if you have an interest and like a willingness to dig into constraints. So understanding like how far you can or cannot push a design. I really haven't had as much trouble here as other places that I've worked. Like our engineers will go above and beyond to like help you make something a reality or offer an alternate solution. But in the past, it has been really hard where it's been like, no, we can't do this. And it's like, all right, that's fine. Can you explain why? And like not really understanding. So I think like getting into actually trying it yourself and like building some of that baseline understanding has been super helpful. For me personally, where I think that coding is like the most helpful is just like that last push to get your design across the finish line and ship something. I personally feel like such a pain going to a front-end engineer and being like, can you like move this down 1M? Like if I could just get in there and like change little tweaks like that myself, I can take a lot of that load off their plate so they can focus on more challenging problems, and then I can focus on really shaping up the design as it was intended.
Cool. And so Jenny and Brian, both of you, first and foremost, kudos to you for both having a really strong understanding of design. But the question for both of you is this: what do you expect from a designer when it comes to collaborating or talking about the transition from flat image to something living and breathing? What do you expect in terms of collaboration, or how much do you hold a designer to knowledge of code or coding itself?
I think it's helpful as an engineer to kind of know the whole story, which is why I like getting inside the process as early as possible, and why I like participating in ideation sessions with designers. I really think that like knowing the why is really helpful as an engineer, because it's your job to make something come to life, and that can be very technical, but at the same time you're kind of like also the like the last person before something will go out, right? Not that design doesn't get like a last overlook, but you're in the middle of, like, you're the one basically when you're like building something, you have to test it over and over again to make sure that it works, and you're in the middle of the design and you're going through this flow like 20,000 times. You're there in the thick of it, and so the more that you can lean on designers to be like, hey, is this, why did you do this, or is this really what you want, like, not to second guess them, but to just have a better understanding yourself so that you can grow your own knowledge of how what makes an experience better for a user. That empathy, like Danny said, is so important, because as somebody who builds something, you don't want to build something that people will hate to use, right? You want to build something that people love. And working with your designer and understanding the why is how you do that as an engineer.
Cool. Brian, do you have any perspective on what you expect out of a designer?
I think when engineers and designers collaborate, I think it can work really well, like, because you're both building and solving problems, right? But I think one thing that's sometimes kind of easy to forget is we're not building interfaces, we're not building screens, right? We're building an experience, right? What is the experience that we want our customers to have, right? And also, like, especially for something like here at Trunkclub, like, what is a user's journey from like the real world and the physical and like to the digital world, and then after they close, like, what do they do, right? So I think asking why, having context is like, that's why it's important, right? Because right now we're designing for desktop web and like mobile apps and stuff like that. I don't know, in 5-10 years it'll be like augmented reality or virtual reality, and like when you have the right process, focusing on the right stuff, like none of that matters, right? It's just a medium, it's an interface. If you have the right process, like what is the problem, like what is the experience we're gonna create, like none of that's gonna change, and just that's where the collaboration can help the most. Like, you're building an experience together, we're exploring problems together, and then we just do it in different ways. And then to that sense, like every team's gonna be different, right? Like some designers are gonna be fine with asking to move a pixel like 1,000,000 times, and some engineers might be fine with it. Just understanding, that you're both trying to solve problems, finding out what each others are comfortable with, and just like taking that approach, I think.
So learning each other's comfort zones. So again, empathy, curiosity. I think you guys can start to see a theme for our tech, design, engineering teams. So we have a couple more questions from Trunkclub to our panelists, and then we're going to put the spotlight on all of you guys. You will then have some time to ask us questions, so get some questions ready in your head. But Jenny, Kelly, Danny, Brian, all of you guys. So we often talk about starting the beginning of a career. Talk to us a little bit about the transition into growing past your junior state. And Kelly, you were recently promoted to senior. Brian, you hire people all the time. For you guys in particular, what does it look like? What does senior level talent look like? And how can our crowd aspire to work toward a senior level role?
I would say within product design, it can be really nebulous. There are so many smaller disciplines that comprise product design. So I think it's finding the things that you're strong in and continuing to grow those skills. I think there's a lot of pressure in the industry to be a unicorn of sorts. And frankly, I don't know how realistic that is, as much as I would love to be a unicorn myself. And so I really think like it's depth of talent, whether that is in user experience design, if it's visual design, if it's research, development, prototyping, any of the disciplines, that writing, anything that makes that up. And I think it's also making yourself an available resource for others on your team as well as within the company. If you can get yourself out there, get to know people, and they can start seeing you as somebody that they can approach, and you can help them out with something that they have on their plate. I think that's a great way to kind of start asserting yourself a little bit.
I mean, for me, the jump going from college and working on products with like myself and a few friends to working inside of a full team and a fully functioning organization is really just about not so much the like hard skills and like designing the screens and the interfaces and the experience, but actually like sort of like what Brian was saying, like the process to get there and working with each other collaboratively. And so I think just like emphasizing on that stuff is super important.
Danny, I'll pick on you a little bit more here. So we did pluck you right out of college. You're surrounded by senior level talent now. What do you hold them to?
Teaching me. Learning from them is like the biggest thing, I think. Leaning on them to ask about different things from hard skills like how to do certain things or how to apply certain techniques, as well as just like how to approach a certain meeting or how to approach a certain problem set, different things like that.
And Brian, for you, you've traversed a decade-long plus track in engineering, and so you've seen senior, and you're now in management. Can you talk to us a little bit about that progression as an engineer?
I think I asked our team a lot too. So like also, because I'm also want to learn like what do other people think what senior engineer is and junior engineers and whatnot. I think it's about context. I think it's two things. Like definitely like the thing about teaching, like how do you become a multiplier? How do you use your talent and just like, use yourself to multiply the team's knowledge? So it's not just 1 + 1. Like you kind of multiply your team's output exponentially by being there, right? But I think also it's about context. And when I say context is like being able to identify what the missing context is and being able to give that context to other people. So for example, like when we work on for engineers, so that for the engineers out there, when we work on a feature, right? And let's say we're working on a big feature, and then we work in agile methodology, so we write stories, and then a senior engineer should be able to just see the big picture and then like break up the work, see what the components are involved, and like, oh, maybe we should go talk to the sales team, maybe we should go to the marketing team because there's something missing here and find that out, and then being able to like delegate that and then just also expose that thought process of what you're doing so that people around you just learn and grow just by being next to you and seeing you how you work. So, and then that's like part of the Trunkclub culture too. That's why we pair a lot. So I think that's key. That's why senior engineers and designers are able to see like, this is going to be like that's why they're good at estimating, right? Because they can see like the high level picture and also be able to explain to both technical and non-technical people like what the work is. Yeah.
And Jenny, you also leveled up your career here at Trunkclub. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looked like and how that happened?
So I'm actually an apprentice graduate from our apprenticeship program here. It was a really great experience. It's a 6-month apprenticeship, and that's how I started here at Trunkclub. So since that time, I've had 2 kind of dedicated mentors here at the company. Both have since left, but I take to heart a lot of the advice that they gave me because they're very good developers. And so one of them told me basically that you need to do things that scare you. And that's always kind of stuck with me because sometimes you get that like feeling in your throat like, oh gosh, what am I doing here? But these are the things I try to do to make myself better. Is if I feel kind of this like pang of fear in like approaching some sort of problem, that's the problem I know I need to solve because I obviously don't know enough about it to make me not scared. And so that's kind of a methodology that I use in like thinking of how what I need to learn next or what I need to look at.
Cool. So we've talked a little bit about your careers and how it's grown at Trunkclub, but somehow you had to start at Trunkclub in the first place. Can you talk to all 4 of you have been a part of the interviewing process. Some of you pull the triggers on actual hires, and we work with Bridget in the back on tech recruiting, design recruiting. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you look for in a future coworker? If somebody is interested in getting a new design gig or a new engineering gig, regardless of company, what do you all look for in a new coworker?
So I would say one of the things that we do is definitely a portfolio review. And so this usually happens after like all of the phone screening and that. So we'll bring someone in and it's really just articulating your thought process and being able to walk through how you got from point A to point B and what steps you took in between. And having a willingness to show us like all of the messy steps that took you to a finished product. That's what I really look for. Shows sound thinking. It shows a little bit of your process. Being able to see like the iteration is really important.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think like when we do these interviews and like portfolio reviews, we're not like as concerned with what's necessarily in the portfolio, but how you present it, how you communicate is a big thing. And how you talk about your work and tell your story, because that's sort of what we're doing on a regular basis, is telling these stories about certain problems or certain teams or certain solutions. So we try and just replicate that in the interview process.
So when you hire someone or when you work in a company, you're going to spend like 40 hours a week at least, like with this guy. Come on.
Sorry.
I love it. So I think that's key, right? What is it like to work with this person? And is this person humble? And is this person collaborative? And do these people have reasons? I think if you have good reasons and good thought process, then you're not going to be stubborn, right? Because if you don't have good reasons, you're going to be stubborn and defensive. And I think that comes to whether it's design or engineering, right? When you do portfolio review, you talk about the design, like why did you design it this way, and then like what did you think about? When you talk about code, okay, what were the things that you thought about, and why is your code this way? And just being able to also like explain that, right? Because if I'm working with someone, if they build something I don't understand, then I need some explanation, and that person should be able to get me up to speed on what that person did. So, and just not being defensive, being humble, and being collaborative. And I think also like just being curious, like, when I ask a question, oh, so what happens when this happens? And like, actually, I haven't thought about that. And then just being kind of open to it, right? That's how we kind of work every day. So that's why I hate those like, like quizzes or like find this algorithm. I think that's kind of BS. So,
Brian, do you like curious people? I'm curious. And Jenny, what about you? You're also involved in not just in interviews for engineers, but designers too. So what do you're sort of in the middle of design and engineering, working with both sides pretty frequently. What do you look for in either side?
I would second all the things that everybody said. The curiosity, the communication, the collaboration, and I think the last probably ingredient I would add is some sort of passion for the things that we do or the things that you make, right? And it doesn't always have to look like I'm super fashionable and I love fashion. It doesn't have to be like that. But I am passionate about making this experience better. I'm passionate about learning these how these technologies can make life better. I'm happy to just sit and talk with you for half an hour about this random problem that we're having. I think that's the kind of passion that we're looking for. It can be for fashion too, by the way. I'm not excluding that as important, but it's really about a passion for problem solving, a passion to sit down and work with us and be excited about the work that we do.
And just for fun, what are some weird things that have happened during interviews that you would recommend to the crowd? Don't ever do that. Don't name the candidate, but what are some weird, like, maybe don't do that in your next design or engineering interview?
I will have one. So definitely bring your computer to your portfolio review if you don't have everything on your online portfolio. Yeah.
Showing work probably seems important, yeah.
So I have one about myself. So when I interviewed, I had just broken my foot, and so I was in a cast, and I was on crutches, and we decided to walk to the lunch part of the interview. And so I was crutching over there. It was only a few blocks away, but totally wiped out. I think I recovered enough because I pulled myself together, but I guess if someone's on crutches, don't walk to the interview, or don't fall.
My interview hero is actually funny. You see if he's here, but so one of my interview section, the person here asked me to teach that person how to write an Android program. So I think Reddit has like a JSON API, and that you can kind of hit it. It'll give you like the data and like, hey, let's build some app, and then like show some pictures. So
oh boy,
yeah, there we go. So yeah, that's where I learned that there's a not safe for work flag. So that was fun.
Jenny, anything funny or silly happened during the interview process you don't recommend people replicate?
I do not recommend. I recommend that when you're in an interview, one part of our interview is to do a coding exercise together, and I recommend that during that part of the interview, if you're interviewing as an engineer, that you talk. I remember sitting in silence for a full 10 minutes and wondering. I'm like, we were asking the candidate to talk through the issue, talk through the problem, because that's the whole interview, right? It's not whether or not you can solve the problem, it's whether or not you can talk about what you're doing and talk about your thought process. And even though we repeatedly said this to the candidate, they were pretty much silent for the first 10 minutes. I actually had wondered if the call had cut off. So so when you get in an interview, please say things, talk. That's what they're there for.
Talking good on interviews. All right, who knew?
Oh yeah, one thing to add that's what I learned in Trunkclub actually. It goes for both sides, right? If it's not a good time to do the interview, I don't like some stuff happens, right? Like I don't know, then just say like, hey, actually, can we reschedule? Like that's totally fine. Things happen, right? And on our phone interview, we always ask that. The first question in our interview guideline is like, ask again, like after introducing yourself, like, hey, is this still a good time to interview? And at one point, like I think there was a couple times where like I think I actually during the phone interview, actually now is not a good time, like because blah 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 blah, right? So just ask that, like things happen, and then like understand that both parties are just human and things happen. Yeah.
Cool. I have two more quick ones, and then we'll turn it to the audience. So the title of this event this evening is The Intersection of Design and Technology. I surveyed the crowd, and I can actually hand-pick several product managers. We haven't talked about them this evening too much, but when I think about people that are really good design thinkers and really good technologists, product managers come to the forefront, and they're usually excluded from the design engineering relationship conversation. How has product management helped you all do better work here at Trunk Club?
For me, it's helped think about things in like smaller chunks.
And maybe just help us learn what product managers do at Trunk Club with us.
Yeah, so they help do sort of all the things that you wouldn't think of, from getting a feature out from idea to like the world. So they help diagnose the problem. They help back up the problem with numbers and stats. They help communicate to the team and to other teams and to other people in the company progress and what we're doing and what we need help with. All that sort of stuff. And so for me, I like to think sort of like longer term, and I like to think further out. But for a product manager, it's really important to make progress in chunks and tangible progress along the way. And so working with product managers here, they've helped me think about still the longer term solution, but also think about how we can break that up and how we can see some results earlier on rather than locking ourselves away and working on something for a year without shipping anything, and how that can benefit everyone.
Kelly, what do you think?
I would say your product manager is your best resource for actually getting a project prioritized. So say there's something that you've seen in an interface that you're working on, could be like down to language, or it could just be an error, or like a little dream that you have for a feature that you'd like to expound upon, or something that you've heard of a pain point from an end user, and it's really like, this is why I think it's important, being able to have an open and frank conversation with them, and like hopefully through doing that they can help you get that prioritized on a roadmap for development, in spite of all of their other roadmap and projects that they've already agreed to.
Jenny, what about you? How have product managers helped shape experiences with you at Trunk Club?
I lean really heavily on my product manager actually to help remind me what's the most important thing that I should be doing. Obviously, when you have all these like tasks that build up or things that you're working on, it's easy to get kind of bogged down in these details that are very engineering specific, but he's usually like a grounding force to say, this is actually the most important thing, we want this out the soonest because of this reason. There are people that are suffering because they don't have it, and that's really what's most important, right? But it's really easy for me in particular to get caught up in something that I'm working on because I'm like, oh, no, it's not perfect yet. No, it's not perfect yet. No, I really want this to be perfect, but it's better to ship than not, right? I think the other thing is that he or she helps you understand the impact that the thing that you're building has, which is a really fun thing as an engineer as well. When you see that you've built something, they're the people that come back and say, okay, well, these are the numbers that came from it. These are the things that happened from it, which is a really great thing to hear and really interesting thing to hear, because sometimes it's not, the impact is not guaranteed, right? Sometimes it's experimental, or sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen. You're just trying it out. So you can see and learn which experience, what direction you would like to head in next.
I love that you say that. A good product manager can inspire both designers and engineers and stakeholders a sense of purpose and a sense of impact, and I think our product managers do that with us. Brian, what about you? You have an intimate relationship with our product managers as well.
Yeah, I think well, that sounded weird, but all right, I lost my train of thought.
Brian, you work really well with product managers.
Yes,
How
I
do you do that?
Thank you. I think good product manager is kind of invisible because because like you don't really know you have a good product manager until like you don't have one. But I guess like what Jenny said, I think engineers and designers are just like by nature they like to like when they see a problem, it's like, oh, I want to solve that. Oh, lights there, and then just kind of get distracted really easily, right? And they go really deep down in the problem too sometimes. But that really helps, like you said, like prioritizing and then like help with the prioritization, like what is a big problem, but also just helping like get that data, right? Like, hey, like, can you help me understand like why this is a big business problem? And then like, you know, backing with data, like pulling the data for us. Also like kind of smoothing out things with like other teams, right? Kind of working on like, you know, if it's like, for example, like customer team and sales team, well, I think we have a very close product working together. So I think that's really helpful too. But I think especially in a Trunk Club is like a good product manager is very like selfless. And like you said, I think that's how like our product manager like gets us inspired, right? Like doesn't care about like what the feature he or she came up with. It's like, hey, like I really want to like, I think this is a good opportunity, and really just giving the context to the engineer and like really encouraging the engineers to get involved in the beginning of the process in the problem identification, and like just really just getting that passion to like, hey, let's do this together, and then being able to give that passion to everyone. Yeah.
Awesome, gang. So we have one more question from me, and then we'll switch it over. So we actually have one more audience beyond the crew here. There's a lot of people watching at home. We've been live streaming the whole time. So I'm particularly passionate about banging this drum over and over at every tech and design event. And I'll start with a list. Groupon, Braintree, Grubhub, Basecamp, Threadless, Spot Hero, Trunk Club, all headquartered where? Here, Chicago. And so much of the conversation about technology is always Silicon Valley, or maybe I'll go out to New York. What would you tell the folks at home, the folks over here? Why do you stay in Chicago, and how do you get people to come to Chicago? Because we honestly do work at a world-class level, but we're perhaps a little humble about it. So how do we get more people to be doing amazing work with us in Chicago?
I thought you said that was a question for you.
No, I'm asking you that question.
Okay.
How do you keep people here? How do we attract more talent here in the Midwest and in Chicago?
I can start. Well, I'll give you some time to think about it.
Do they need to be curious?
I think hiring is hard. Like as people who the industry know, like especially senior talent, right? But I also think it's our duty and job to kind of make it more diverse, right? And then there are all smart people out there. They can do different things and that have different perspective. They may not have like the exact experience that we're looking for, but I guess that's something, skills and techniques, something like you can learn and teach, right? So a great example of that is at Trunk Club we have a apprenticeship program where like people with non-traditional computer science background like get to be an apprentice, and then we have like Jenny, you were a military journalist before, and then we have Jesse was there who used to be a lawyer. A lot of different people with different background who just bring different perspective, and then they're really they can really think critically, think analytically, and then I think that's one way to kind of like give opportunities to people who are different from us, right? And that's what helps make a good product, right? It'll be boring like if we're all the same, right? So, and then that's how I can also learn from these people from different backgrounds and stuff like that.
Cool. Danny, what do you think? You live here in Chicago. You could have gone anywhere. You've started 2 companies. You're a CEO and a designer. You stuck here. Why?
The thing I like about Chicago as opposed to like San Francisco or somewhere else is that everyone's pretty different. If you go to San Francisco, it seems like everyone is working in tech on a company and they're all founder and they're all sort of doing the same thing. And so whenever I go there, like I have some friends who live there and I go and visit them sometimes, like after like day 3 or day 4, I'm like, I need to get out of here because everyone is the same and having the same conversations. If you're in Chicago, there's definitely a big tech scene, but there's also tons of other people doing interesting stuff. So it's not the same thing everywhere, every person, every day, is what I think is best.
And Kelly, you almost moved last year. While you were interviewing, Trunk Club was one of many people you were talking to. Some of those cities weren't in Chicago, but you stuck with us and you stayed here. Thank you. But why?
For me, it was definitely like a love for Chicago. I've been here for like only a little over 5 years now, and I think everyone says like you're not a true Chicagoan until you've been here for 10 years, or at least that's what I've heard from certain people. But there are just like so many things about the city that I love. The tech community here being one of them. I think it's a digestible size where it feels like there's opportunity here, but it's also a low barrier to entry in terms of like meeting new people and making connections. And I think through making those connections, you can kind of figure out like what the culture is at different places around town and where you might be interested in, just based on like the people that you've met and the interesting conversations that you have with them.
Awesome. Jenny, what about you? You moved here as well.
I did. I'm a transplant. Y'all, have you tasted the food here in this city? It's amazing. No, I think I have to second what Kelly says a little bit. One of the nice things about the tech community here is that are you interested in a particular company? Do you think somebody is really cool? Why don't you just shoot them a note on Twitter and ask to have coffee with them, and they'll say yes. I mean, everybody here is really accessible, and I think that's. I'm not sure that that's the case in San Francisco. I've never lived there. I think Chicago is a lovely city. It's not as frantic as New York. For somebody who's a little bit more shy or a little bit more slower paced like me, I think that Chicago is such a great fit. It's something different. The city is beautiful in the summer. It's so much fun to live here. I mean, all these things, these quality of life things are super important. But if you're, like you said, if you are looking to work in tech, like you can, like you said, shoot a Twitter note to anybody here and they'll be like, yeah, let's talk, let's chat.
Cool. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it to you guys now, and then I'll keep it short, 10 minutes, because I know there's drinks back there, and I see dark clouds about an hour away. So, not to scare anyone, I saw some head nods. I saw some people shaking their head like, yeah, you resonate with that. Who's got questions? Kelly Graver. Oh, shout it, and I'll repeat the question for sure. Oh, yeah. This is a great crowd to ask. So the question was, can you name other things you do outside of Trunkclub that benefit what you do at Trunkclub?
So this is kind of an easy reach, but actually next week I'm volunteering at App Camp for Girls, which is helping 7th grade girls learn Swift. So I am their design mentor, and it's super interesting. They're not even going to be working in Sketch, Photoshop, InDesign. They're actually like sketching out their interfaces by hand, and then they'll layer their like view controllers on top of them. But it's like teaching them about icon design, teaching them about mobile patterns, and so like just doing that and teaching people, I think is definitely related to what we do every day.
I don't know if this is the right order to go because yours is really awesome. I was gonna say, I like games. I like play games. There's a game called Overwatch, and it's a online shooter game, but it's really you have to be. It's a team-based game where like 6 people have to work together to a common goal. Like it's not about like who's the best shooter, like who does like game. It's just all about communication and collaborating together. So as an online game is, sometimes you don't always get the perfect mix of folks, right? And there's a lot of fights and friction, and then that's where I learned like you gotta like look at the positive and then like really like what's the struggle here, and then understand the struggle. Try to like take a team that like hate each other, and then like like hey, we're all here because like we want to win. Like what do we need to do, and just like get them to work together, like and then like that's really like fortunately like people here at Trunkclub is like super awesome, but like you learn a lot about like how to take a group of people and they really find ways to just like work together better. So
you heard it here first. Your path to management is online gaming. Okay, Danny, we got to hear from you on this one.
So I work on a company on the side, and for me, I mean, it's not super indirect in terms of how it helps. I like to do a lot of the actually engineering stuff and like data science type stuff for that stuff a lot.
Can you talk to us about that company?
Yeah, so it's called Joy. It's an app that helps you track and improve your mental health. And so it has this conversation with you, and it analyzes your conversation over time and helps predict mood and helps proactively interject to improve your mood, improve your behaviors, improve your thoughts. And so there's a lot of fun and interesting stuff and challenges that keeps me busy and excited outside of work, and directly translates to the stuff I'm doing at work. I'll be working on things at home or in coffee shops on the weekends, and then on Monday I'll be prototyping and be able to utilize that same stuff for a different problem or a different solution.
Awesome. Jenny, anything you do outside of work that helps influence our customer experience, or any of the things that you do just at Trunkclub?
So mine's super literal. Because I'm a boot camp grad, that means my undergraduate degree is actually in photography and art. And so to help me build a kind of foundation of computer science, I take computer science classes. So this, I think especially for boot camp grads, is pretty important because while a boot camp can get you like rolling, get you started, get you building things right away, which is super important, it's really helpful as you move further along in your career to have like a better understanding of how a computer works and that sort of thing. So that's my outside of work activity that I do.
Just to quickly add to that, we really value people's side initiatives, people's passion projects, because we know you actually care about this craft. And so we see that with almost everyone we've ever hired, that they do something amazing or important to them outside of work, and those are the kind of people that we really want to put on our team. Great question, thank you. Any other questions? In the back. What kind of project management software do you use? And if you don't use any, spoiler, how do we manage our projects?
So on the design team, we do a lot of stuff in Dropbox paper documents. We all use Slack, and then the engineering teams use Jira. Boo. I'm not a fan of Jira, but I use it because that's what our engineering team runs on. But we're also always trying out new tools. Anyone can start trying out new tools and propose it to the team and go from there. So it's sort of fluid and always changing.
Yeah, I think that's key. Like you mentioned, like, oh, you don't like Jira, or like we use paper. Well, I don't like paper, so no. So we just being flexible about it. Just like we have every 2 weeks we have a retro, and like our team's like super flexible and trying new things. I think our product manager said, hey, let's use paper and let's like ditch Jira for a while and to see how that goes. That didn't go well, but anyway, we tried things, and then like only then like you learn, right? Like, oh, I don't like it, or it worked well, and then that's how you kind of keep on iterating on the process. So just explore things, be open to like trying out new things, and then like be able to talk about what you like and not like about it, but at least try it out, right? Like don't just like, oh, I'm not gonna use paper or something. But yeah.
Yeah, Brian, that's a really good point. At Trunkclub, we sort of ride the tension between not enough tools and too many tools. And if there's too many checkboxes, underscores, this, that, and the other, it's probably killing our productivity. So I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head that we're flexible on that. I think that kind of wraps up tools. And unless Kelly or Jenny, you want to add anything to that. Awesome. Thank you. Any other? Yeah, up front.
This is a GA-sponsored event. Did you go to General Assembly for your boot camp or any of your courses?
So this is a General Assembly sponsored event. Did any of you go to General Assembly? If not, where did you go? And just talk about the spirit of the boot camp culture in general. Maybe Kelly, or sorry, Jenny.
So I went to Dev Boot Camp here in Chicago. Dev Boot Camp. And actually, I was talking about this a little bit earlier because they recently announced that they'll be closing in December. It makes me really sad because I had such a good experience there. But I think that one of the reasons I liked it so much is that I mentioned that my husband and I went through together. We were actually the first married couple to graduate from the school, so I take great pride in that. Thank you. I think it was a very intense but interesting experience. I always kind of laugh when people say the boot camp model doesn't work because I'm like, well, tell that to the U.S. military because that's the one they use. It was very, like I said, it was a very intense experience, but a nice foundation for people who are motivated to get their foot in the door in technology. So.
And one of the reasons we're excited to partner with General Assembly is that a lot of us at Trunkclub have guest lectured for them, we've guest taught for them, and something that we're really, really, really passionate at Trunkclub, both on design, product, engineering, is that our community involvement. And so we fully embrace other types of schools. We don't favor any one school, but we're here to support a good culture of learning, and that happens at the workplace. And so boot camp school or short-term schools is totally up our alley. And actually, if you survey the landscape of our engineering team, at least half or a good fraction of our engineers come from short-term schools that have transitioned their careers. And our design team, most of our designers aren't traditionally trained designers. So we fully support that model. Thank you. 2 more questions. Yes.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I was wondering, what are your biggest obstacles in fitting in the group and any learning curves you've had this year?
Joyce asks, what are the biggest challenges in fitting in within the group, and what else? And the learning curve once you started your career, or maybe even at Trunkclub. Biggest challenges getting going.
That's a great question. I would say challenge at Trunkclub is like understanding the comprehensive experience for both like what a customer goes through and also what our stylists go through on the back end. Our teams are like aligned to sales, merchandising, the consumer experiences, And so like drawing all of those connections together was a little bit challenging at first until you like get a grasp on it, because like something you do in a sales tool will definitely have a ripple effect across the customer experience.
Any other challenges getting going both in your career or just getting started at Trunk Club?
I think it's really, really funny. When I first joined the company, there was a lot to learn about the tech, about how a tech team will work, what a product manager is. People kept saying PM for a long time, and I was like, I don't know what that means. But about how designers and product managers and engineers work together, what it really means to be a collaborative engineering team. That's kind of important too, like the things that you write and how they affect other people inside your team. Those are kind of like some things. Technology-wise, I started out as a backend engineer writing Ruby, and I transitioned after I graduated from my apprenticeship. I started writing JavaScript. And anybody who writes JavaScript knows it's a really fast-paced, moving community, and so that was super overwhelming and a very big learning curve. Yeah, so that was kind of an obstacle, just trying to keep up with that. But it's been fun, but just it's a lot of work.
Really quickly, Danny or Brian, do you have anything you want to add?
Maybe just like being okay that you don't know everything, especially when you come in, and knowing what you don't know, and being open about it, because no one expects you to come in knowing everything. When you come on board, they're expected to actually help you teach and help teach you different things about the business, about skills, about the processes, all that stuff.
Cool.
There's a lot of interesting problems to solve, right? And not only in Trunkclub, but any place. And you get really excited, especially when you get surrounded by other passionate people, and just admitting that you can't do everything at the same time, but also just asking for help. I think that's what I struggled initially. I was like, when I signed up for too many things, I got overwhelmed. But then like, hey, it's okay. Like, admit the fact that I can't do it, and then that's okay. That's fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Last question before we get back to drinks and mingling. Josh, in the back. What was that word you said in the middle again? Danny and Kelly, you talked a lot about what? Emulation.
So I was wondering if there's any like companies or products that you guys look to sort of like implement that in your work, and maybe if there's like a specific case, you can just shed a light on that.
Cool. So fun fact, that's Josh on our Trunk Club service team. He helps our customers deal with a lot of their issues, and he's also learning design. So to the designers, what are your inspirations, and how'd you start gracefully copying them?
It's hard to nail down one. I mean, I just look like every app that I use and look at, I try and steal things from, see what they're doing well, see what I don't enjoy. I can't think of a good example. I don't know if anyone.
I will say two that I really love. Medium, because it just feels like so clean and modern and simple, and like you can really focus on the writing, but the experience like still feels fun. And then as far as like e-commerce goes, I love Everlane, kind of for like the same reasons. Yeah, I think Everlane does some really, really nice stuff with interactions. It's also very clean, and you can like focus in on the products that you're seeing.
Real quick, Jenny, are there any companies that you sort of hold in high regard?
As a product, I love Pinterest.
Pinterest, yep.
Yeah. Just I love using it, and so they have a good engineering community. They write a lot, so.
Excellent. All right, last question for you guys. How can the crowd follow up more with you, or how can we find you or internet stalk you all?
Everywhere. No. So I'm on Twitter. My handle is Kelly J. Burke, or you can email me. It's just Kelly, KELLYB, @trunkclub.com.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, same here. Twitter, my handle's Danny Freed, and email's danny@trunkclub.com.
Yep. Same Twitter and Medium. Hi, Brian Lee.
Y'all can follow me on Twitter, but now I feel like a big nerd because I have an underscore in my name. I know, it's hard. So it's _ Little Red Ninja, and my email is jenny@trunkclub.com.
How do we spell Jenny?
Oh, that's important. That's a very important detail, friends. It's JENNIE.
Awesome. Well, give it up for our panelists this evening. They did amazing. Some first-time speakers over here. I'm going to turn it back to Teresa really quickly so she can say a few more words on General Assembly. But before I do that, I want to thank Trunk Club's IT crew, who last second said, by the way, we're going to live stream this to the world. And we didn't know that. And so thank you to the phenomenal IT team that got us all set up. Thank you to Megan and Bridget in the back. They've been serving you booze all night long. They're on our recruiting team. If you really want to work with us, you should probably talk to them. Raise your hand if you work at Trunk Club, please. Turn around. So please talk to these people about life at Trunk Club and just how they got started. So many of these folks also had similar stories as our panelists. And Teresa, come on up.
Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I know we talked a lot about learning and growing, the importance of that. And at General Assembly, our mission is to empower people to pursue the work that they love. And a big component of that is through building skills. So if you want to learn more about user experience design, coding, data science, data analytics, product management, or digital marketing, we have courses that will help you change your career or build skills and add those to your tool belt. So as we transition into networking, can we get a pulse on the room? Can you raise your hand if you are hiring? What are you hiring for? UX visual designer. Who else? I saw some other hands. What are you hiring for in the blue shirt over here? Software engineers at Trunk Club. Who else? Right here. Product, UX, and data science. Anyone else? Data engineers at Trunk Club. Am I missing anyone? No? Okay, now raise your hand if you're searching. Yeah, go talk to those people. Meet your neighbor, make a friend. Come check out General Assembly. Have a great night.
All right, we can all hang out now.
So is she.